Yeah, we had a quick test and now we're back, folks. Now we're back. Let me make sure we're up and running. Should be good to go. Looks like it. All right. All right. Running my quick test on my end, and then we're taking off, folks. Hope everybody's doing good. Making sure all the notifications went out for everything. We are live on YouTube and on Facebook. So you should be able to see us on Meta, and you should be able to see us on YouTube as well. Yep, we are good to go. So today we're going over Medicare again. What do you know? But we're going to cover leading up to the annual enrollment period some things about Medicare you need to know. So today, what would typically be offered in a webinar, we're going to chop it up into a few series over the next few weeks. So today we're going to start our intro to Medicare, Medicare Made Simple. So today, well, typically we would talk about all of these things, but we're probably only going to make it through fundamentals and maybe into Medicare supplements, okay? So some things that we need to be taking a look at here is that retirees face quite a bit of challenges and always involving money. But healthcare is the fastest growing major expense in retirement. And most people are significantly underprepared for what they're actually going to have to face in out of pocket cost. So, some things to be very much aware of is the projected annual growth, for one, in healthcare spending. In addition to that, health insurance premiums have dramatically outpaced inflation, meaning whereas inflation over the same time period as what we're measuring for health increase was about a 2.9% inflation, whereas you have a 52% inflation for family premiums. That's a big deal in comparison to our income, especially when we're not getting raises and income just as fast. And so that leads us to this statistic, which is where it shows that seniors allocate a much larger portion of their budget to healthcare. You know, compared to the normal 8%, it's almost doubling at 13.4. So 13% of your income, if you're bringing in $5,000 a month, you know, that's about 530, somewhere around that. Quick math for you. Okay, so let's talk about a few things here. What's new for Medicare in 2026? Well, if you weren't already aware, there's now an out-of-pocket cost that's now on your drug plan that used to be an unlimited out-of-pocket potential with different phases to include the notorious donut hole that no longer exists. But prescription drug costs are now capped at $2,100 per year. $2,100 per year may seem like a lot of money, but not in comparison to when I have seen clients paying over $5,000 a year for medications. And now once you hit that cap, you have no more cost sharing, so they pay 100% after you've met that cap. Okay. Now that means that you probably have more skin in the game somewhere else, and so the deductible is now $615. And you may have noticed if you're already on Medicare that a lot of the premiums for your drug plan has went up. Okay. And that's good and bad in different ways. It's good for people who are overpaying for meds, and it's bad for people who don't take any, because you have to maintain a drug plan to make sure you keep credible coverage, so that way you don't have any penalties down the road in different circumstances. So, other things to know here: drug price negotiations. That was a big hot topic from our president at the time, Donald Trump. Negotiated prices on the 10 high cost Part D drugs. So that's an estimated $1.5 billion in savings. It was stated, I believe, that we're going to have the cheapest prices of anywhere for those medications. And the shorthanded version from our president, when he stated it, was that, you know, if several countries are paying $10 for medication and we're paying $500, we're going to have it as cheap as the cheapest price that any other country has it. So we'll see how that plays out. But these are the new drug price negotiations that are going around now, specifically as it relates to Medicare. Now, the big one, you may even see an ad from us right now about this, but the GLP-1 weight loss drugs. GLP-1, what are those? Those are medications that signal to the GLP-1 pathway to help you lose weight, and it helps with lots of things like insulin sensitivity. It improves that. It does a lot of cool things. But the problem is that it was not affordable for most people. which makes it not an adequate way to help with weight loss, So qualifying beneficiaries now access GLP-1 medications at $50 a month. So you can get Wegovy and Zepbound, things like that, as soon as July 1, 2026. Now, usually you might have been out 500 that first month because you had your deductible to deal with. But now maybe you're only dealing with the $50 a month, which makes it way more accessible for the majority of retirees. Okay. And then we have our mental health and well-being. There's some expansions around that and ways to get access to things. And I'm double checking our feed here, make sure I have not missed any questions. Jumping over to our Facebook feed specifically. All right. Yeah. So in addition to price negotiations for medications, GLP-1 weight loss, there were some other things like increases to your Part A, Part B, things like that. So we're covering those things here in just a moment, okay? So what is Medicare? Well, glad you're here. Welcome to the Roadshow. Now, Medicare is the largest health insurance program offered by the U.S. government, and it serves nearly 69 million people as of 2025, okay? Now, this, if you're watching the news and you're keeping up with the Trump administration cabinet, it's run by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We know that person to currently be Dr. Oz, which was an interesting selection, seeing him as a TV star and then moving into a role like this. But and it's regulated under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And so with Medicare, we have 4 major parts, and we're going to break this down into 3 major categories. So the first category are Medicare Part A and Part B. Now, I'm going to get you to notice some terminology that I use to help file this in the brain for you. But when you hear the word Medicare Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, the word part, when you hear that, I want you to automatically register government. Okay? Government. If you hear the word plans, I want you to think private insurance company. Okay? That's a good way to help with all this language that's coming through. Sometimes it can get overwhelming and create a little bit of confusion, but if you use that distinguishing term, part, government, so Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, and then in a moment you may hear plan, like Plan G, Plan F, Medicare Plan, whatever. Okay? Now, you have Part A, Part B, Part C, and Part D. Now, Part A and B, we're going to group that into one category because they technically make up your major medical. So with original Medicare, which there's 2 major routes, we're going to cover those. Maybe not get to all of it today, but there's 2 major routes in Medicare, and one is you opt into Medicare Part C, which is known as Medicare Advantage, right? And then you can opt into original Medicare, which is what you sign up for, and you'll stay with that unless you choose the Medicare Advantage program. Now, what is Part A? Well, Part A is basically the room and board at the hospital. So it's essentially your hospital insurance, inpatient hospital stays, skilled nursing facility, hospice care, home health services, that kind of thing. But then Part B is services rendered unto you, okay? Services rendered to you, mainly medical insurance, So namely, we have doctor appointments, outpatient care, occupational and physical therapies, preventive services, any kind of service that is administered to you, that's going to fall under your Medicare Part B, okay? So Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B. Now, what is Medicare Part C? It is Medicare Advantage program. It's where everything that you get with Medicare A and B is outsourced to a private insurance company that you select. And the same thing is true with Part D, which is where your prescription drug coverage is outsourced to a private insurance company. So all those benefits would be administered by a private insurance company in these 2 programs, okay? Now, you can't have a drug plan and a Medicare Advantage plan at the same time. So typically, if you needed drug coverage, you would get a Medicare Advantage plan that included that, just to make that distinction clear. Okay, so who is eligible for Medicare? Great question. So glad you asked. There's only a few people. Well, one is you have to have a certain age. Okay, so if you are age 65, turning 65, you're eligible for Parts A and B, even if you still work. Okay. Now, your spouse may also qualify. Okay. So if you're married, you may qualify through your spouse, though you must still meet age or disability requirements. So assuming that you have 40 quarters of the Medicare tax paid in as a married household or as a single person, then you would be eligible. That's 10 full working years, to be clear. You would be eligible for your Medicare. But you must, so that's the baseline, but then you must be turning 65, aging into Medicare or disabled for 24 months or longer. And the exception to that rule, to those rules, are that if you have end-stage renal disease or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis (ALS), that qualifies you at any age. Okay. Um, yeah. So now this is a very common question that we get about enrolling in your Medicare, and we just talked about it briefly with a client moments ago, which is, am I auto enrolled in my Medicare? Well, sometimes. So if you're already receiving your Social Security benefits, then yes, you will automatically be enrolled in your Medicare. Okay. That includes railroad retirement too. So a good way to remember this, and I like to say it as a layman term just to make it easier to remember, but if you're already receiving the government's money, the government assumes you need their insurance. So think of it that way. So if you're already receiving your Social Security check or your Railroad Retirement Board benefit check, then you would automatically be enrolled into Medicare. Okay. In addition to that, here's the way this goes down. You're going to receive an initial enrollment period package by mail. Typically, this will arrive 3 months before your 65th birth month. Because the initial enrollment period is 3 months before, the month of, and 3 months after your 65th birth month. Okay. Now, that is your initial enrollment period. You get it one time, never get it again, unless certain circumstances, such as being on disability prior to aging into Medicare. Okay. If you kept working, that would not apply to you. That's a different scenario. But there is a way, if you're disabled and then you ate before age 65 and then you turn 65 again later, you would technically have a second initial enrollment period. Now, if you are not receiving your Social Security check, if that's you, raise your hand, then you need to proactively enroll in your Medicare. That means you need to take the initiative to reach out to Medicare and have it set up, or at least Social Security. So you can call the Social Security office or you can call the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I typically recommend calling Social Security office. Sorry, I had to hit mute. Thought someone come in the office, y'all. So here is that initial enrollment period, kind of broke down into a visual illustration for you. We have covered this in other videos a little bit more in depth, but this is a great snippet for you to look at to make it more understandable. So I call it the 313 rule, and it's where when you're first eligible for Medicare, meaning you're turning 65, the 3 months prior to you turning 65, the month of, and 3 months after. So 313 rule. Okay. So if you retire after 65, enrollment depends on when your employer sponsored coverage ends. So in the scenario that you wanted to continue working after you were first eligible for Medicare, meaning you're 65 and you're getting older, but you want to continue to work, in a ideal scenario, you would defer your Medicare Part B, meaning you don't enroll in that. Your Part A, you would automatically be enrolled in, but Part B, you would defer and keep your group coverage. That would qualify as credible coverage for you in the majority of scenarios. So if you had a question about that, you can reach out to us or to your Medicare advisor or retirement planner. They should know. But if you're something else to define here is if you're newly qualified due to disability, which is a little different than aging in, your IEP starts at the time of that qualification, which would be stated in your disability letter saying you've been approved. Okay. So whatever the date stamp on that is, it typically would be the first of the following month. Now, missing your IEP initial enrollment period without qualifying coverage may result in a permanent late enrollment penalty. So when I said the term earlier, credible coverage, what I meant was that with your drug benefits or your Part B, so Part B as in boy, Part D as in drugs, if you missed that IEP window and you did not have credible coverage, you would have an accumulating late enrollment penalty that wouldn't be charged actively to you. But as soon as you said, hey, I want to go ahead and enroll in that now, then you would have to address your late enrollment penalty that is an ongoing penalty for life that cannot be revoked. Okay. So there may be some exceptions to the rule out there, but the majority of people are going to have that penalty for the rest of their life, forever and ever. Amen. All right. So it's best to get this right the first time. And as the old carpenter would say, cut twice. Nope, got it wrong. You measure twice and cut once. Okay. Measure twice, cut once, get it right the first time. All right. Don't get the penalty. Nobody wants that. It's not nice. So let's talk a little bit about what original Medicare is going to cost. Okay, let's understand what we will pay out of pocket. So, original Medicare Part A and Part B cost in 2026. So, assuming that your income is in the normal range for most people, your Medicare Part A will cost you nothing, and Medicare Part B will cost you $202.90. So, you're basically going to be out $203 a month. Now, you have a Part A and Part B deductible. So, a lot of people are not aware of this, but Medicare defines your major medical as two separate benefits, Part A and Part B. And because of that, they have their own separate cost structures. Okay. Now, the good news is that there's a gap plan that can be purchased, which companies like ours and other insurance brokerages can broker this for you. Neat thing is that you get our services just like most other people without having to pay extra for that gap plan. It's the same cost whether you go directly to the insurance company or use somebody as an advisor. So the monthly premium here for Part A, this is without your gap plan added, $0, 202.90 for Part B. So just looking at Part A alone here on the left hand side of the screen,